Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Sometimes Victoria felt like her own life was an endless day of groundhogs. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, nothing changes. She runs from dawn to dusk, like a squirrel in a wheel, at lightning speed, and yet, no matter how fast she runs, she stays in the same place. However, from the outside everything looked quite well. Victoria had nothing to complain about. Her family was almost a model family, a faithful, loving husband, and cherished children. A small, but their own apartment. Inexpensive, but comfortable car. And a small, but steady paycheck at a boring, but reliable routine job. Victoria never complained because many other people had much worse lives. Some friends envied Victoria and sighed. "Victoria, you are so lucky. Alejandro loves you very much, colleagues respect you, Dalia is an A student, the pride of the class, and Pablo is an obedient and smart boy. Other women have husbands who drink heavily, cheat on them, and beat them, their kids are stupid bullies, and they have to pay off loans." And still, sometimes Victoria just wanted to cry out in helplessness and sadness. Would nothing interesting or surprising ever happen in her life again? Will her life now always be so drab and monotonous? It seemed to Victoria that there was nothing else ahead of her. But as people say, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. If only Victoria could imagine how much her life would change literally overnight, how her whole normal world would be turned upside down, she would never have complained about fate and waited for change. That morning nothing foretold trouble. "Mom," Dalia said quietly at breakfast, kissing her on the cheek, "can you give me some money? The girls and I want to go to a pizzeria after school today and celebrate the beginning of the summer break." Victoria sighed heavily. She didn't have much money left, it would only be enough to buy groceries. On the other hand, she knew how important it was for her daughter could not be worse than others. They wanted to go to the pizzeria, and Dalia had to go with them, too, so she wouldn't look like an outcast. Although her husband is supposed to get his paycheck just today. "Okay, I'll handle it all somehow," Victoria decided and took her purse. "Here you go," she held out the banknotes to her daughter. "Just don't hang out too long. Come home for dinner." "Mom," Dalia complained, "I'm not a little girl." Victoria smiled as she looked at her daughter. "At 14, you already feel so independent and grown up." Her son Pablo had been coughing suspiciously since this morning, and Victoria shook her head in frustration. He had only been in kindergarten for a week. Could she go on sick leave again? She hurriedly slipped the thermometer under his armpit, anxiously looking at her watch to make sure she wasn't too late. She would have to stop at the pharmacy before work to buy medicine, and then she would take the usual route, take Pablo to the kindergarten, then run to the bus stop, and after that spend another half an hour in the overcrowded, stuffy bus, tightly pressed against the bodies of other passengers. Her husband left for the office very early, so he couldn't give her a ride, but Victoria was used to doing everything herself. At work, Ida, an activist in the accounting department, was collecting money for a gift and flowers for their boss whose birthday was coming up. "The boss's birthday is coming up. We should chip in for a gift," she announced. Victoria sighed heavily again. It seemed as if everyone had colluded to leave her without money today, but still, she took her purse without complaint and gave Ida money. She hoped her husband had already received his paycheck. "Alejandro," she texted him on Messenger, "if you got the money already, send some to my card. I need to go to the grocery store and the pharmacy, Pablo is sick." Her husband read the message but didn't respond. Victoria didn't pay much attention to it. He didn't answer, but he read the message. Now he knows that she needs the money, so he will transfer it to her today. However, the workday was coming to an end, but her husband never transferred the money to Victoria. "Did you get your paycheck or not?" she texted him. But this time her husband didn't even read the message. Is he really that busy? Victoria got worried. She checked her account a few more times before the end of the day, but there was no transfer, not even a message from Alejandro. Did something happen? Worried, she dialed his number, but his phone was turned off. At this point, Victoria became really scared. What had happened to her husband? Where is he? Why was his phone turned off? Barely making it to the end of the day, she rushed home. She even had to borrow some money from a colleague to buy medicine and groceries. Pablo was sick after all. The kindergarten teacher told Victoria that the boy was weak all day, didn't eat well, coughed often, and by the end of the day, he had a fever. At home, after putting her son to bed and giving him medication, Victoria began to make dinner quickly, trying to call her husband from time to time. His phone was still off. Maybe the battery died? She even dialed her mother-in-law's number just in case. Good evening, Margarita Perez. Did Alejandro happen to stop by today? I can't reach him. He is not answering my messages and he is still not home. No, he hasn't even called today, her mother-in-law said, not even hiding her hatred for Victoria. She sounded as if she was happy that her son's family was in trouble. She didn't like her daughter-in-law much, but she tolerated her, and Victoria paid her back in kind, though both kept a polite neutrality when they met. Getting over herself, Victoria asked her mother-in-law, "If he does show up at your place, please tell him to call me right away." It was getting dark, and her husband still wasn't home. Dalia had already returned from the pizzeria. "Mom," she shouted from the hallway. "I ran out of money, so I borrowed some from the girls. I said I would pay them back tomorrow." Victoria exclaimed, "Dalia, you're just cutting me without a knife." Nerves were already on edge, and her daughter made her even more nervous. Dalia immediately frowned. "Why are you so stingy?" "I didn't ask much, did I?" Victoria only shook her head helplessly. It was late at night, but her husband still hadn't come home. She didn't know what to do. She imagined terrible pictures. He had been attacked, robbed, beaten, or maybe he got in an accident. At 10 p.m. the key creaked in the door lock. Victoria rushed into the hallway, feeling great relief. He had come, so at least he was alive. Now she would scold him for making her worry so much. However, when Victoria saw her husband's face, all the angry words she wanted to say disappeared from her mind. Alejandro was as pale as death, his expression was like a frozen mask. She rushed to hug him in fear. "Alejandro, I was very worried. Where were you? What happened?" Her husband indifferently allowed Victoria to hug him. He didn't even try to take off his jacket, or at least take off his shoes. "Victoria," he finally said with a dry mouth, "Victoria, if you only knew what I have done." Victoria felt cold. She tried to understand what he could have done. Cheated on her? Murdered someone? What happened? Tell me. Alejandro covered his face with his hands. "I lost a large sum of money." Victoria was dumbfounded, not immediately knowing what he was talking about, and when she realized, she gasped. "Alejandro, you promised me that you would never gamble again in your life," she exclaimed. Her husband lowered his head guiltily. Victoria almost cried, looking at his drooping shoulders. She was already tired of fighting this plague, a passion for gambling. When they first met, Alejandro was a heavy gambler. It was absolutely impossible to stop him from playing. She started to re-educate him, which took more than a year. Sometimes her husband could lose all of his earnings in a single night. Victoria cried, screamed, swore, took him to psychologists, and threatened divorce. But this obsession was stronger than him. However, when Dalia was born, he stopped as if fatherhood had blocked this wicked obsession. For many years he did not even think of gambling. Victoria had already thought they had turned over the gambling page of his life and forgotten it as a bad dream. But it happened again, so suddenly. So it is true that there are no ex-gamblers, just as there are no ex-alcoholics. Trying not to show her despair, she asked in a calm voice, "How much did you lose?" He shook his head as if he couldn't bear to even think about it. A lot. "How much?" Victoria repeated with pressure. Her husband put his arms around his head and started making excuses. I swear, Victoria, I don't know how it happened, as if I had lost my mind. Everything was going great at first. I was so lucky, I'd already won a lot of money. But then suddenly I lost it all. Do we have to borrow money from someone? Get another loan? She asked in a shaky voice. Alejandro shook his head with a painful grimace. Do not be silent. Say something. Victoria shouted angrily. Can you just tell me the truth? Do we have to sell your car, our apartment? The husband shook his head again and finally mumbled out. Victoria. I'm sorry, but it's not just about the money. I lost you. At first, she thought she'd misheard. Then she thought it was just a bad joke. What are you talking about? Lost me? How is that even possible? I'm a human being, she said nervously. She thought her husband was going to laugh, hug her, and say something like, it was a joke, smile, you're being filmed by a hidden camera. However, Alejandro was deadly serious. He looked at Victoria and said, It turned out that my boss likes you very much. Remember, you came to the party with me. He noticed you back then and said he still couldn't get you out of his head. He forced me to gamble. Honestly, Victoria, it's not my fault. And when I lost, he said he'd forget about my debt if you came to him tonight. Do you even understand what you're saying? She asked in frustration. So you want me to sleep with your boss for money? He lowered his eyes to avoid looking at his wife. But we don't have a choice, honey. If I don't do what he said, I'll be in debt or even in jail. If you don't do it, we'll lose everything, the car, the apartment, absolutely everything. Please don't be so selfish and think about our children. Do they deserve this? Victoria was speechless for a moment. Think about our children. Did you think of the children yourself when you decided to gamble again? Please, Alejandro suddenly knelt in front of her. I beg you, save me, Victoria, save us. If you don't, I'll kill myself, I swear. Tears came to his eyes. He tried to take her hand and kiss it. Victoria was in shock. It seemed to her that she was just watching a movie, that she was looking not at her husband, but at a stranger on the screen. And he was a stranger, as it turned out. She had no idea how far his meanness could reach. I swear I will love you till I die. I will carry you in my arms. I will do anything you say. Alejandro swore fervently. I'll never gamble again. I'd rather poke my eyes out and cut off my hands. Please, honey, help me out, just once. I beg you. Victoria squeamishly took his hands off her lap. Get up off the floor, don't humiliate yourself, she said. And be quiet, or you'll wake the children. I don't want them to see this shit. The husband blinked his eyes miserably. So what have you decided, Victoria? She closed her eyes, not believing in what she was saying, but she pulled herself together and said, I will go to your boss. Alejandro exhaled with relief, and there was such an unconcealed expression of happiness on his face that Victoria wanted to punch him, or at least spit right in his face. Just wear something sexy, you know? He muttered, without looking her in the eyes. Put on some makeup, some perfume, you know. Victoria became angry and joked bitterly. Maybe you can also tell me what underwear is better to wear. You know what sets of underwear I have, so help me choose, so as not to disappoint your boss. Her husband immediately shut up, fearing that she was about to get angry and change her mind. Victoria decided to wear a long black dress. It wasn't vulgar, but it tightened her body like a glove. Her hair fell to her shoulders. She touched her lips slightly with dark red lipstick. Are you ready? Alejandro fussed when he saw her. Just a minute, I'll call him now. And in a few moments, he was already talking to the boss in a friendly way. Hello, Maximo Lorenzo, it's me, Ortiz. Yes, I told her. Yes, she's ready. You promised to send a driver. Okay. Okay, I got it. When he finished talking, he turned to Victoria. The driver will be here soon, take you to the place, and then, he hesitated for a moment, then bring you back. Victoria did not react to his words. She had no strength to stay in the same room with her husband even for an extra second. She was disgusted to look at him. "I'll wait downstairs," she said. "Victoria, I hope you're not going to run away. Please think of us, of the children." Alejandro said, frightened, but immediately shut up. Victoria shook her head bitterly. "Unfortunately, I have nowhere to run to." The car pulled up in front of the house just 5 minutes later. The driver gallantly opened the door for her, and Victoria sat in the back seat. It started to rain. Looking at the raindrops on the window, she thought, even the weather is mourning me. They drove through the city for about half an hour. Finally, the car pulled up outside the gates of a luxurious mansion. The driver opened the door and walked the woman to the house, holding an umbrella over her head, as gallantly as before. "Come in," he said. "Maximo Lorenzo is waiting for you." Victoria hesitantly crossed the threshold and stopped, looking around, not knowing where to go. She could not believe that it was real, that it was not just a nightmare. She really wanted to wake up and realize that nothing had happened, that her life was still drab and boring. "Maybe I should have gotten drunk," she thought, "but it was too late. If I got drunk, I wouldn't feel so disgusted and so ashamed." "Victoria, come into the dining room," she heard a voice and turned around at the sound. She did not remember her husband's boss, Maximo. But now, looking at the young, handsome man in the stylish suit, she suddenly realized. She danced with him at that ill-fated party where they met. That's when he noticed her. Why on earth did she go with her husband to that party? At the time, she couldn't have imagined how one innocent dance she didn't even remember would ruin her life. "Hello," the man said, looking at her with deep gray eyes. Victoria was frightened, thinking he was going to take her right now, and took a step back. Maximo recognized her fear and smiled. "Don't be afraid, let's have dinner first." Victoria felt nausea. "I'm not hungry," she said, and then, shaking her hair and looking desperately into his eyes, she added firmly, "Let's just do it, and forget about it forever." Maximo smiled slightly. "We're in no hurry. We have the whole night ahead of us." Victoria clenched her fists with such force that her nails dug into her palms. "I hate it, I hate him. I hate them both," pounded in her temples. "But if you're not hungry, I don't insist," the boss suggested. "You don't have to eat, but at least drink something." "Yeah, I'd drink something strong," Victoria said quickly. She was afraid that she simply could not do what he expected her to do when she was sober. "Let's go," he invited her gallantly. Maximo walked her into the living room, where a table was set for two, candles were lit, and the fire in the fireplace was crackling. The atmosphere seemed cozy, but Victoria didn't notice it under these circumstances. Once at the table, Maximo gallantly pulled back a chair for the lady. He sat down opposite her and opened a bottle of sparkling wine. "The King of Saudi Arabia gave me this wine," he said so calmly as if he were talking about some neighbor guy. "He made me promise that I would open this bottle and drink it only with my wife." "So why didn't you keep your promise?" Victoria asked indifferently. Frankly, she didn't care at all. "I have no wife," said Maximo. "So why not drink it with a woman I really like?" Victoria laughed wryly. "Mr. Lorenzo, you have odd conceptions of affection for women, though. You gamble to win a night with a woman you like. If I have no other way to get close to her, why not?" He responded calmly. Then Maximo poured the wine into glasses and approached Victoria. She tensed visibly again and automatically leaned back in her chair. "Do not be afraid, Victoria, I don't bite. And please, call me Maximo," he suggested. "After all, soon we will become closer to each other." She bit her lip. "Well, whatever you say, Maximo," she replied. He added calmly, "You forgot to add, yes, master." Victoria opened her mouth in shock and frowned. "Seriously?" But he laughed. "I'm just kidding. You look like you're afraid I'm about to throw you a party with chains, whips, and blindfolds. Relax. I promise you, I'm not who you think I am. She shrugged her shoulders. I don't think of you at all. You're very beautiful, but for some reason, you're wearing black, like you're in mourning. Victoria hesitated a little, but then responded honestly. I am in mourning. Really? Who did you bury? He asked. She grinned bitterly. The old me, the one I was before today. After a second, she felt a light touch on her hair. Wow, he stroked her head as if she were a little girl. Don't be so dramatic, maybe the new you will be even better than the old you. To hide her confusion, Victoria hurriedly sipped her wine. She didn't understand Maximo's desire to make small talk with her. After all, she didn't come here to have dinner and talk. She thought it would be funny if he asked her to dance, like at that party. But that's exactly what he did. Shall we dance? Yes, master, she returned the joke to him. He laughed heartily. You're funny. But Victoria wasn't laughing. After placing his glass on the table, Maximo clicked the buttons on some remote control, and a soft, pleasant melody began to play. He walked over, bowed his head, and held out his hand, inviting her to dance. She obediently stood up, feeling her legs shake. Maximo put his arm around her waist and led her in a slow romantic dance. Victoria told herself that she hated him with all her soul. She must hate him. This man humiliated her husband and trampled her in the dirt. He believes that he can buy anything and anyone. Nobody will ever refuse him, and he knows it. Master of life. The damn mighty king. She tried to make herself hate Maximo, but she failed. She actually wished he would have given her the slightest reason to hate him, like trying to kiss her. Then she would have been able to call him a vile, lustful, ruthless, self-righteous man. But Maximo had been extremely gallant to her. He didn't take his eyes off her, almost burning her with his eyes, but he didn't cross the line. Now Victoria felt much more hatred toward her husband. He was the reason she was here now with Maximo. He is the one who had set her up, who had given her to his boss. When she thought of her husband, tears came to her eyes, but she blinked hastily to hide them. Is something wrong? Maximo asked worriedly, noticing the change in her expression. Look, Victoria said, why are you trying to play kindness and generosity with me? Why all this wine and dinner and compliments and dancing? Why? He shrugged his shoulders. Maybe because I want you to like me? It's useless, she exhaled. Am I really disgusting? The corners of his lips went up. Yes, that's what she wanted to say, but she realized that it wasn't true. Maximo wasn't disgusting. He wasn't acting as she expected. She thought that pain, shame, and humiliation awaited her, but in fact, she had nothing to complain about so far. She felt no hatred toward Maximo, and she was mad at herself for it. This man is the enemy. He ruined her family, and he ruined her marriage. Victoria will never be able to hug her husband now, nor will she be able to look him in the eye. Can we get to the point? She asked sharply. Are you in a hurry to go somewhere? Home, Victoria answered. I have children there, and tomorrow I have to work. In the morning I will take you to work, he promised, but now you are mine. Even if it's just for one night, but you are mine. You agreed to this, didn't you? Then why aren't you doing anything? Victoria's lips quivered. She could hardly hold back her tears, so she grabbed her glass and gulped down the rest of the wine. I wanted to just do it and forget about it. Forever. I don't think you're ready yet, he smiled and poured her more wine. I really like you, so I won't do anything against your will. Anything that happens between us will only happen with your consent. Are you mocking me? Victoria was shocked. What kind of stupid game is this? You act like we're on a date, and like you have no idea why I'm here. I'm here to save my husband. Your husband is pathetic, Maximo said in a calm voice. Victoria flared up like a match. You have no right to talk about him like that. It was you forced him to gamble. And if I hadn't agreed, he might have ended up in jail or killed himself. Then let him kill himself, Maximo said calmly and ruthlessly. Think about it, he chose to sacrifice you, not himself. He preferred to shift the responsibility for his idiocy onto your delicate shoulders. And how does he feel now? I guess he's sleeping soundly while his wife. Shut up! Victoria shouted. Maximo shook his head. Why won't you face the truth? Your husband is a coward and a traitor. He set you up, and he will do it again if he has to. You'd better not test my patience. She took a plate from the table. If you don't stop, I promise I'll throw it at you. It seemed that the whole situation was amusing to him. Well, try it, he suggested. I have many plates. Victoria threw it, but at the last moment her hand shook, and the plate fell to the floor right at Maximo's feet, falling and smashing to pieces. And suddenly all of Victoria's strength was gone at once. She dropped to the floor like a broken plate, covered her face with her hands, and wept. She didn't even realize right away that Maximo sat down beside her, put his arm around her shoulders, and held her head against his chest. And she felt so good, cozy and safe in his arms, that she cried even more bitterly, the way she had cried only when she was a child. It's okay. Calm down, my dear, he whispered, stroking her hair. You're very brave, but you're so scared and desperate. Don't be afraid. I won't do anything bad to you, nothing you or I would regret. I'm so tired, Victoria sobbed, pressing her face into his chest. Tired of being strong, tired of solving other people's problems. I know. You just need to get some rest, get some sleep. Let's go. She looked up at him with frightened, crying eyes. Don't be afraid. You'll just go to sleep, he stroked her cheek, wiping away the tears. I won't touch you, I promise. Victoria really did get a good night's sleep for the first time in years. She slept in the guest bedroom. The bed was wide, comfortable, and soft, and the white linens smelled delightful. And a bottle of water and a plate of fruit had been left for her on the nightstand beside the bed. She slept in Maximo's t-shirt. He apologized that there were no female clothes in the house, but assured her that the t-shirt was new and clean. All night long she had wonderful and kind dreams. Victoria even woke up with a smile on her face and lay there, stretching and relaxing, until she remembered yesterday's events. It was as if a cold wave hit her. Victoria sat up abruptly on the bed and looked around. Colorful images flashed before her eyes and changed like a kaleidoscope. First, she tried to call her husband in vain. Then he comes home and begins to sob, begging Victoria to save him. Next, she arrives at the Maximo mansion in a black dress. They dance, and then she cries on his chest. Lord, did it really happen to her yesterday? Victoria frightenedly pulled the blanket over her naked legs. She was alone in the bedroom, but maybe there were hidden cameras all over the bedroom. Thinking about hidden cameras, Victoria decided not to risk taking a shower. She just washed her face and brushed her teeth. She found her black dress on the back of a chair, quickly pulled it on, brushed her hair, and found her shoes under the bed. She wanted to get out of there as soon as possible and to forget everything that had happened as a bad dream. Yes, Maximo had not touched her yesterday and had promised he would not hurt her. But that means she hasn't fulfilled her obligations, and her husband still owes Maximo a lot of money. Or has Maximo forgiven him? But what if he changes his mind? Nervous and biting her lip, Victoria cautiously walked down the stairs, trying to look independent and proud, but still, she was embarrassed when she saw Maximo. He looked awake and fresh, nodding to her cheerfully. Good morning. Tea, coffee, juice? What do you want for breakfast? There are scrambled eggs and ham, toast, and some fresh pastries. Victoria's stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday, but she hastened to say no. Thank you, but I am not hungry. Refusal is not accepted. Maximo shook his head. You haven't eaten anything. You're already trembling. You have to eat something or you'll faint. She took a few bites from the croissant, took a sip of coffee, and got up from the table. Please, Maximo, can I go home? I'm not stopping you, he shrugged, The driver will take you home." After hesitating, Victoria finally decided to ask what worried her the most. "What about the debt?" "Tell your husband that he owes me nothing," Maximo said coldly. It felt as if a mountain had been lifted from her shoulders. Thank you very much." "Are you so worried about him?" Victoria thought for a moment there was a hint of jealousy in his voice. "He is not worth even your finger." Victoria decided not to talk about it. She came home quite early. The children were still asleep, but her husband was waiting for her. When she entered the hallway, he rushed to her, and he peered at her face, greedily and jealously, as if trying to find traces of the night's adultery. I'm so sorry," he muttered apologetically, meeting Victoria's gaze. But he was anxious to clarify. "Have you done everything he asked?" Victoria felt so disgusted that she even wanted to take a shower. "Don't worry," she sighed wearily. "You are no longer in danger." Seeing her husband exhale with a noticeable relief, she hurried to leave, so as not to see his face. He was really pissing her off right now. "I'm going to take a shower," she said. Alejandro pondered and uttered sadly, "Yeah, I'm afraid after everything that happened last night, you won't be able to wash all that dirt off you anytime soon." Victoria stopped, shocked by his words. Is she the one who won't be able to wash herself off? So she's the one to blame for what happened? "What did you say?" she asked him quietly. "Say it again." "That's not what I meant," he said, anxious. "But now we have to live with it. I don't think I can forget it. But I don't blame you, I forgive you." Victoria got angry. "Forgive me? Forgive me? You're just a pathetic bastard." She swung and slapped him on the cheek. The slap made her husband flinch, but he didn't even move, just rubbed his cheek silently, apparently realizing he deserved it. "What if your boss wanted our daughter instead of me?" Victoria asked quietly. "Would you do that, too, to save yourself?" He recoiled from her with his eyes full of horror. "How can you say such a thing? Dalia is our daughter, I love her, and I would never do that to her." Victoria shook her head. "You told me you loved me, too. And yet you gave me to this predator as if I were a piece of fresh meat. You're a disgusting bastard." Alejandro twitched at her words as if she had hit him again. Fortunately, he was smart enough to remain silent. Victoria stood in the shower, shivering from the icy water until her lips turned blue. She wanted to wash that dirt off of her. No, she didn't want to wash away the memory of Maximo, especially since he hadn't done anything to her. She wanted to wash away the disgusting, sticky feeling that Alejandro had betrayed her. She couldn't get Maximo's words out of her head that someone who betrayed her once would betray her again and again. There was no guarantee he wouldn't do it again. Wrapping herself in a towel, she stepped out of the shower and headed to her husband. "Promise me," she uttered, "promise me that you will never gamble again." At first, she wanted to ask him to swear by the health of their children, but something stopped her. Subconsciously, she didn't trust him. "I swear," Alejandro assured her with sincere eyes. "That I never again." Victoria closed her eyes tiredly. She wanted to believe him. "Okay," she sighed, "get ready for work, I'll make you breakfast." She needed to forget everything that had happened to her at Maximo's. She had to try to live a normal, boring life again. She called her boss and asked for a day off because her son was sick. This was true. Pablo was still coughing and had a fever. So Victoria decided to call the doctor. But even if Pablo had been healthy, she wouldn't have been able to come into the office today as if nothing had happened, to perform her daily duties, to chat with her coworkers, to smile. She didn't want to see anyone. Victoria sincerely hoped that she would be able to forget about what had happened. The days passed one by one. The husband was quiet and obedient. Maximo did not remind her of himself in any way. At first, Victoria was afraid that her husband's boss would harass her, but no, everything was quiet and calm. But things were not so good in their family. Despite Alejandro's perfect behavior, there was a coldness in their relationship. Both tried to behave as if nothing had happened. In public, they pretended to be a happy family, but there was no more sincerity, warmth, and love between them. In addition, Victoria noticed that Alejandro avoided touching her. At night, he even moved to the edge of the bed so that he would not touch his wife with his hand or foot in any way. It was unexpected and unpleasant. One day she could not stand it and asked, "What's the matter? Am I disgusting to you now?" "No, why do you even ask about it?" he assured her, hurriedly and insincerely. "How can you say that, Victoria? You are my savior. Then embrace me," she demanded. Alejandro was confused. "What?" "I said embrace me right now." Victoria, husband hesitated, but then forced himself to step closer and put his hand on her shoulder. She laughed. "I see. You don't want to touch a dirty whore, huh? Do you want to stay pure and innocent?" "Well, what did you expect?" her husband asked angrily. "You spent the night with my boss. After that, I can't touch you, I can't even think about it. I'm disgusted to look at you. But how do you communicate with Maximo after everything that happened? Do you find him disgusting too?" Victoria teased. "Or maybe the boss is something different and can shake his hand and smile friendly? What does Maximo Lorenzo have to do with anything?" The husband mumbled confusedly. "Okay," Victoria waved her hand. "Go to sleep, I don't want to see you." "What do you mean?" Victoria was silent for a few seconds, but then dared to say one important thing. "Alejandro," she asked him quietly, "let's divorce." She had no idea what would happen after she said that. Oaths of eternal love, tears, passionate kisses. Barely pulling away from his embrace, Victoria turned away and closed her eyes. Her life turned into some nightmare, became fake. Everything was fake in her life now. She was living with a man she no longer loved, not even respected, but only despised. Everything burned out in her soul, all her former feelings disappeared in just one rainy night. She had a desert inside her, she didn't want anything, and she didn't need anyone except her children. She tried to save this marriage just for the sake of the children. Victoria knew that Dalia and Pablo would take their parents' divorce very hard. They loved their father. And she couldn't even tell them the truth. "Clench your teeth and bear it," she told herself. "You're not the first, you won't be the last to live in a loveless marriage. Accept it and endure it." But a few months later, when everything seemed to have calmed down and returned to normal, it happened again. Alejandro had lost a large sum of money again. It was like a recurring nightmare. It was pretty much the same scenario. Her husband staying late at work, ignoring her calls and messages, then showing up at her doorstep looking guilty, sobbing, falling to his knees, and crying. "Victoria, please save me. You are the only one in the whole world who can do it. My boss is completely obsessed with you." This time Victoria didn't even protest. She went silently into the bedroom to change and came out. Her husband looked at her in bewilderment. His wife put on simple jeans and a sweater. "Are you going to seduce Maximo Lorenzo in jeans?" he asked. "Are you crazy? Couldn't you find something a little more sexy? A short skirt or at least a blouse with a deep neckline. You're not even wearing makeup." "Don't worry," Victoria said in an innocent voice, "your boss likes me in any outfit." Her husband turned red. "What?" he asked with a wicked squint. "Is it just me, or did you enjoy that beautiful life?" She nodded seriously. "I enjoyed it, Alejandro, and I finally met a normal man. So thank you for this opportunity." "You are just a slut." He choked with indignation. "You're ready to sell your body to any rich man. Do you expect him to give you expensive gifts or take you on vacation? Do you have any objections? You're the one who pushed me into his arms. I see you don't mind." Alejandro said angrily. "If you don't like it, I'm not going anywhere. Victoria pretended to take off her shoes. There's a chicken in the oven. I think I'll continue cooking dinner. Alejandro changed his face. No, please, he exclaimed in fright, and then he said sweetly, Victoria, sorry, that's not what I meant to say. Go to Maximo Lorenzo, make him happy. That make him happy almost made her vomit. Call your boss, she said with disdain. It's not nice to keep him waiting. Her husband immediately dialed the number, listened, nodded, and guaranteed that he understood everything. Maximo said that you would spend the whole weekend with him. The whole weekend? Victoria raised an eyebrow. He also said, Alejandro mumbled in confusion, he said you should take your passport with you. Victoria was surprised, but did not say anything. She silently took the passport out of the cabinet and put it in her purse. You can take the children to my mother for the weekend, she said. They will be happy. They have not seen their grandmother for a long time. Don't miss me, my love, Victoria added slyly and felt some malicious satisfaction at the way her husband's face twisted. Maximo was waiting for her at the gate of his mansion. He was also dressed quite simply in a sweater and jeans. He looked at her and nodded happily. That's a great outfit. It's like you felt we were going on a trip. Where to? Victoria asked curiously. To her surprise, she felt comfortable and cozy with Maximo. For some reason, she knew for sure that he would never hurt her or betray her. Surprise, he smiled. What countries have you been to? Only Turkey, Egypt, and once in Thailand many years ago, she answered embarrassedly. Well, then it's time for you to explore the world. Victoria was confused. But I don't have any visa. Relax, he smiled. The consul is my friend. They'll get you a visa in a minute. Did you take your passport? I did, she said, and couldn't help but joke. What would you do if I had no documents at all? Nothing is impossible for me, he assured her. We'd just get you a new passport in a couple of days. It seemed that nothing was really impossible for this man. First, they went to the embassy, then Maximo took her to the mall to buy new clothes, shoes, and accessories. Victoria didn't protest. She wanted to finally feel like a woman. It felt good to be taken care of, to be pampered. And then they headed to the airport. When Victoria saw the number of the flight, she gasped. Italy? Really? A beautiful place for sophisticated and romantic women like you, Maximo smiled at her. What makes you think I'm sophisticated and romantic? She objected, but she felt good, despite everything. Victoria, I just feel that you are very tender, vulnerable, and fragile, he said seriously, and then he looked at her in a way that made her cheeks flush. Victoria was embarrassed and lowered her eyes. They traveled in business class and had some champagne and strawberries during the flight. Victoria even managed to get some sleep because the reclining seats were so comfortable and spacious. The plane landed. Victoria was afraid that now she would wake up and this fairy tale would turn out to be just a beautiful dream. Venice, the most romantic place on earth. Everything that happened to her next was like a wonderful dream. They rode on gondolas along the canals and listened to serenades, enjoyed delicious coffee and the world-famous gelato ice cream, ate real Italian pizza, strolled along the narrow winding streets, and fed greedy pigeons in St. Mark's Square. And when their legs were aching with fatigue, Maximo suggested they go to a hotel. The hotel was luxurious. This is your room, he said, and I'll be in the next door if you need anything. Victoria was surprised by this politeness. He had booked 2 different rooms. Get some rest, Maximo continued, and then change into one of those dresses we bought. The opera is waiting for us. The famous tenor is giving his only concert tonight at the Teatro La Fenice. When they came back to the hotel at night, Victoria's head was full of wonderful impressions. Before saying good night to her, Maximo took her hand. Victoria immediately tensed, thinking, here we go, you have to pay for everything in life. Now he's going to start harassing her, luring her to his room and ruining all the charm of the day. But she was wrong. Maximo limited himself to simply kissing her fingertips, and then he said, "Thank you. It was the best day of my life." Victoria caught herself thinking that perhaps it was the best day of her life, too. She felt so good here. With him, she didn't even want to go back home. All good things come to an end, though. The next day, the plane took them back home. Alejandro never forgave her for that weekend in Venice. Even though he forced her to sleep with his boss, he couldn't help thinking that Victoria seemed to be doing too well. And he, too, wanted to get more of the good things out of life. The last thing that finally ruined their relationship was that one day her husband asked her, "Look, maybe I should change my car. What do you think?" Victoria looked at him in confusion. "Why, do we have some extra money now?" "Well, we don't." He looked away. "But I think that it's not a problem for Maximo Lorenzo." "What does Maximo Lorenzo have to do with it?" Victoria didn't understand what he was talking about. "You should just give him a hint," her husband suggested. "Be nice to him, you know. Maybe he will not only buy me a car, but a house for us." Victoria looked at him in horror. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes, why not?" "Don't you understand, Alejandro? This is disgusting." "What's disgusting about it?" He answered with incomprehension. "You spent the night with him at least twice. You have nothing left to lose. You are out of your mind." She shouted. "Do you even understand what you're saying? Sleeping with him to save my husband is one thing, but going to bed with him because my husband wants a beautiful life, that's too much." "Yes, I want a beautiful life," Alejandro said. "Do you think you're the only one who deserves to spend weekends in Europe, live in luxury hotels, and drive around in expensive cars? I want that, too. And I want an expensive car. I want to travel around the world." "You're an asshole, Alejandro," Victoria shook her head. "Then why have you lived with such an asshole for so many years?" Her husband asked angrily. "You know, I don't even know why I've been living with you all this time." "I think it's time to stop this nonsense." Victoria turned off the faucet over the sink, where she was washing dishes, and wiped her hands. "You know, honey, it's time to hire a lawyer." "What for?" Alejandro didn't understand. Victoria grinned. "To get a divorce." She had no idea it would be so hard for her. Her husband was absolutely against the divorce and made a terrible scandal. "Do you want to move in with your lover in his fancy mansion, to wear diamonds and gold, while the kids and I will live in poverty?" Victoria just sighed wearily and shook her head. "Stop talking nonsense. I'm not going to abandon my children. They will not live in poverty. And you're a big boy, you can take care of yourself. I'm not giving you the kids." Alejandro waved his finger threateningly in front of her nose. "Don't even think about it. They shouldn't communicate with such a lecherous mother like you. I won't let some stupid slut raise my children." Victoria laughed. "Seriously? You call me lecherous, and you pretend to be innocent. Do I have to remind you where it all started?" "Shut up." He turned red with anger. "What do you call a woman who goes on a trip with her lover knowing that her husband and children are waiting for her at home? And what do you call a man who sells his wife to his boss?" Victoria answered a question with a question. But her husband didn't hear her. He had lost control of his emotions. "Sooner or later, you would have left me for Maximo. I'm sure you made up your mind back then, at that party, when you danced with that bastard. Don't even try to deny it. It was all your idea. You told him about my obsession with gambling, and you and Maximo planned it all together. You waited impatiently for me to lose so that you could rush to your rich lover." Victoria refused to believe her ears. "What are you talking about?" "Yes," her husband kept yelling. "I knew it. That was your plan." Victoria couldn't hear it anymore. She took her purse, put her jacket on, and left, unable to stay in the same apartment with her husband. Soon everyone learned that she had filed for divorce. But the offended Alejandro decided to tell the story of their marriage a little differently. It became clear to everyone he is a poor, deceived husband, and she is a selfish, sneaky, cheating wife. Many mutual friends turned their backs on Victoria, not even saying hello to her when they met. Colleagues did not express their condemnation openly, but Victoria could now constantly hear the whispering and giggling behind her back. She tried to ignore the gossip, but she did not always succeed. Her mother-in-law kept saying that her son was living with a vile snake. The worst part was that all these dirty rumors reached even the children. At school, Dalia's classmates did not hesitate to discuss her mother's affair with a local millionaire. Maximo was a well-known person. His name and pictures were constantly in the media. Dalia, with her adolescent maximalism, shouted, "I hate you. How could you do this to Dad?" Victoria reached out to stroke her daughter's cheek, but she recoiled. "Someday you'll understand and maybe you'll stop judging me. I will never forgive you. You betrayed Daddy's love, you betrayed our family. I don't have a mother anymore." Victoria left, swallowing her tears. She knew that her daughter just needed time to think about everything. Even the kindergarten teachers looked at Victoria and whispered something to each other when she brought her son there every morning. But she tried to ignore it. Dalia flatly refused to move into a rented apartment with her mother, staying with her father to support him after her mother's betrayal. But at least Pablo stayed with her. He was still a baby, he needed his mother, all the time, every day. Victoria's sister was the only one who knew the truth about Victoria and Maximo's affair. Victoria didn't dare to reveal the details of her scandalous divorce even to her mother. "Just tell Alejandro that you didn't sleep with Maximo," her sister suggested. "Maybe when he finds out that nothing happened between you, he will calm down a little." Victoria shook her head. "No. I wanted to tell him the truth, but after everything he said to me, I won't confess. I don't have to justify myself. He is the one who ruined our marriage. He humiliated me and lied to everyone about the circumstances of our divorce. And now I have to prove my innocence and beg for forgiveness?" "No," Victoria shook her head decisively. "If he likes to think that his wife is a fallen woman, let him keep thinking that. I will not prove anything to him. And I'm not even upset by the fact that all my friends have turned their backs on me. So they were never true friends." But, as it turned out, that was only the beginning. At work, the boss invited Victoria to her office and, awkwardly averting her eyes, asked her to quit. "Why?" She was dumbfounded. "I have always worked diligently, and I have never let you down. Victoria, you know all the dirty talk that's been going on about you. Did you believe the rumors, too?" Victoria asked sneeringly. "Well, let's just say there's no smoke without fire. I don't want all this dirt to affect our company. Our reputation is sacred. And you will scare away all our clients with your love affairs. I'm sorry. We are a serious company. Reputation comes first for me." Victoria only stared at her in shock. She quit the same day. She simply had no choice. Over the next months, she desperately tried to find a job, but to no avail. It turned out that it wasn't so easy when you were 35 and not 20 like the other applicants. She had some savings, but they were melting before her eyes. It was getting harder and harder to pay her rent. And she also had to eat something, pay for kindergarten, and buy winter clothes for the child. Victoria could wear her old boots and jacket, but Pablo grew out of his last year's clothes. And the new year was coming up, the kids' favorite holiday. She needed money to buy him presents. Victoria still had a few luxurious dresses, shoes, and an expensive handbag, which Maximo had bought for her before the trip to Italy. Victoria could have sold it all and made good money, but she hesitated. It wasn't nice to sell the gifts, even though she had nowhere to wear them. "Don't be stupid," her sister told her. "Call Maximo and ask him for money. I think he would be happy to help." "You know me, Marissa," Victoria shook her head. "I never ask anyone for anything." At first, she was a little upset that Maximo did not try to contact her, but gradually she calmed her wounded ego. Apparently, he was bored of seeking the attention of an ordinary old woman. Yes, Victoria considered herself an old, unattractive woman. He was probably tired of trying to win her over. It happens. But she's strong, she can get over it. Except she was afraid to confess, even to herself, that she missed Maximo. But since he hadn't tried to contact her in all these months, she certainly wouldn't impose on him. And she certainly won't ask him for help. Yeah, you're really stupid, her sister summed up. I can't stand to watch you suffer in this tiny rented apartment anymore. You could live in a mansion, like a queen, and celebrate the new year in the Maldives under a palm tree with mango in your hands. I don't think I'll ever travel to the Maldives, Victoria laughed sadly. Don't worry about me, I will make it. Thank God, I have arms and legs, I have a head, I'll find a way to earn money. The decision came unexpectedly. Victoria loved to cook, and she was quite good at it. She was especially good at all kinds of pastries, pies, and cakes. One day the landlady, Lucila Suarez, a cheerful retiree, stopped by to get the payment for the previous month. Victoria was just about to have tea with Pablo. She invited Lucila to the table, and Lucila gladly accepted. She offered the landlady a piece of the cake she had made that morning. Lucila Suarez tasted it and after a bite began to praise it in many ways. This is so delicious. The crusts melt in my mouth. And what a cream, what a soft cream. Actually, this cake is very easy to make. I can share the recipe with you, Victoria said. You are very talented, girl. Listen, the landlady perked up. Can you make the same cake, but bigger? I have an anniversary coming up in 2 weeks. I wanted to invite a lot of guests. I will pay you for the work and the ingredients, she added. To be honest, I don't know, confused Victoria. I've never baked big cakes, especially for money. You should, you're very good at it. I'm afraid to let you down, Victoria was still hesitant. Lucila Suarez patted her shoulder encouragingly. Surprisingly, Victoria agreed. She put her heart and soul into the anniversary cake for the landlady. The cake was perfect, and the cream was incredibly soft. Lucila Suarez walked around the cake, exclaiming that she had never seen such a beautiful cake and don't even want to cut it because it looks too good, but she can't wait to try it. As it turned out later, the main topic of conversation at that party was this magnificent cake. The guests wanted more and asked the birthday lady where she bought it. Lucila said that she ordered it from a friend. And then everyone demanded Victoria's phone number so that they could order the same cake. Unexpectedly for Victoria, people began to call her and order cakes for all sorts of events. At first, she was happy about the opportunity to earn some money, so she accepted all the orders. She made simple cakes and pastries, no tiramisu, cheesecake, or profiteroles. But her cakes with fresh berries, her waffle tubes with condensed milk, and her cherry pies got famous all over the city. The taste of childhood, satisfied customers said, ordering another cake. There were so many orders that she had to get a notebook to write down the details of all the orders. Gradually, she even began to say no to some clients. For example, sometimes there were 3 or more orders on the same date. As her client base expanded, Victoria began to think about hiring an assistant. However, Victoria could not bring her into the kitchen of her rented apartment. What if I opened a little pastry shop? She thought one day. At first, the idea seemed wild to Victoria, and she quickly rejected it. But then she kept thinking about her own bakery and even began to calculate how much it would cost her. She knew she didn't have enough money. Should she get a loan? No. Stupid idea. The bank will not approve a loan for an unemployed single mother. Ask Maximo for money, her sister kept chanting in her ear. Call him. Tell him you will pay the money back gradually. He is an entrepreneur himself, so he should understand and support you. Eventually, Victoria began to think it was a wise decision. She could really borrow money from him and then give it back in a couple of months. She did not know Maximo's phone number, so she had to go directly to the company's office. It was good that her husband had quit there a long time ago, or he had been fired. She did not go into details. Meeting her ex-husband was the last thing she wanted right now. Everyone in the office obviously knew who she was. Her arrival had the effect of a bomb. As soon as she entered the building and made her way to the girl at the front desk, she immediately heard the whispering and noticed the taunts and leering glances. But Victoria had faced such a situation before, so she simply ignored it. Maximo's reception room was very cozy. Palm trees, an aquarium with exotic fish. His assistant also recognized the visitor. Maximo Lorenzo has important telephone conversations with a foreign partner, she said grudgingly. He's busy. You can put your request on paper, and I will give him your letter. No, thank you, Victoria smiled sweetly. I prefer to talk to him personally, face to face. You will have to wait for a very long time, the assistant said with frank gloating. Victoria wanted to bite her. No one bothered to offer her a seat or at least a glass of water. Victoria, trying her best to remain friendly, sat down in the soft chair and folded her hands in her lap like a schoolgirl. She was ready to wait like that until morning, if necessary. Sylvia, I'm going to see Toro. Maximo Lorenzo came out of the office hurriedly. He looked different, tired, serious, wearing a suit and tie. I will be back in about 3 hours. Suddenly he saw Victoria and froze. She smiled timidly and stood up. Hello. Hello, he said as if he still didn't believe that Victoria wasn't just a hallucination, that she'd really come to his office. How long have you been waiting? It's been 2 hours. Maximo looked angrily at the assistant. Why didn't you tell me? Excuse me, Maximo, the frightened assistant said. You said not to interrupt. You said not to disturb you unless it was something really important. Remember once and for all, Victoria is important. He barked. The assistant was very frightened. She turned pale and trembled like a sheep's tail. Then Maximo looked at the coffee table near the chair. It was empty. Maximo immediately realized that Victoria had not been offered any tea, coffee, or at least water with lemon. Make us 2 cups of coffee, right now, he ordered and nodded at Victoria, inviting her to come into his office. What about Toro? The assistant asked in confusion. I'm not going anywhere, don't you see? I already told you, Victoria is a special guest. Finally, they were alone in his office. You look wonderful, he told her. Thanks, I guess it's because I'm divorced, she sneered. I know, Maximo confessed, I haven't lost sight of you. What? Victoria frowned. What do you mean? My people have been watching you, he said, embarrassed. I had to be sure you were all right. What do you mean, all right? She still didn't understand. You know, to make sure you don't need anything, to make sure you're safe. I even sent some of my clients to you, he smiled. They ordered cakes and pastries from you. Victoria was speechless. But why didn't you ever show up yourself? Why did you hide? Maximo shrugged and answered honestly. I wasn't sure you wanted to see me. I thought maybe you were depressed after your divorce, still mourning your idiot husband. I filed for divorce, not him. Victoria said coldly. Why would I suffer? You filed for divorce? His eyebrows went up in disbelief. But why? You were ready to do anything for him, you even came to me. Haven't you heard all the rumors about me that started circulating when I filed for divorce? He wrinkled his forehead in concern. No, I haven't heard anything. Actually, I try to avoid any rumors, and my subordinates don't tell me anything like that. They know I don't like it. The assistant brought 2 cups of coffee and some sweets and cookies on a tray, put them on the table, and left. Victoria's stomach rumbled treacherously. After all, she spent more than 2 hours waiting. She was hungry. Maximo could hear the sound of her stomach and smiles, and Victoria turned red with embarrassment. He smiled again and put the cup in front of her. The coffee is not as fancy as in Venice, but it's not bad either. The mention of Venice took Victoria's breath away. What a wonderful trip it was. So, what about the rumors that have been circulating since your divorce? He reminded her of the subject of their conversation. Well, Alejandro told everyone that you and I had been lovers for a long time, that I had been cheating on him shamelessly. He thought that you and I had invented a plan about gambling, that you scammed him, and that I had been planning to leave him for a long time. It sounded so stupid. What an idiot, Maximo shook his head. I didn't fire him, he decided to quit. I didn't ask him why. I just didn't want to see his face again. If I had known he was spreading false rumors about you, I would have found a way to punish him. Leave him alone, Victoria grimaced. I don't even want to think about him. You don't want to think about your ex-husband, Maximo concluded. And what about me? Do you ever think about me? Yes, Victoria confessed honestly. And you? Did you think of me? Maximo shook his head in the negative. I didn't. Everything shattered inside her, but he went on. I didn't just think of you, I missed you, I suffered, I couldn't get you out of my mind. You occupied my heart the day I first saw you at the party. Victoria lowered her head. The conversation took a wrong turn. It was nice to hear that, but she knew it wasn't real. He was playing with her. She thought he was still the hunter and she was just another prey. Besides, she didn't just come here to talk about their past. At that moment, it was as if Maximo had read her mind and asked, "So what's the reason for your visit?" "I don't think you missed me," he smiled, but she could hear the bitterness in his voice. Victoria pulled herself together and explained her plan. She said she wanted to open a small pastry shop, decorate the place, put a few tables there, and organize delivery. She described her business plan in detail and outlined how much money she would need to start and how long it would take for her to pay him back. Maximo listened attentively, nodded, and sometimes even made some notes in his notebook. "Do you need money?" he finally asked. "Yes, but don't worry, I'll pay it back," she said. "Don't even think about it," he said, looking at her. "Consider it my compensation for your ruined family life." "No," Victoria protested, "I don't need any compensation. You are not the one who ruined my family. I'll give you the money back." "Come on," Maximo grimaced. "You'd better give me back my heart." "What?" Victoria was confused. "You have shamelessly stolen my heart." Maximo got up from his chair and approached Victoria. "Just don't pretend that you don't know how I feel about you. I've told you many times that you've been on my mind since the first time we met, but you either ignore it or think I'm just kidding." "Are you serious?" Victoria asked quietly. She couldn't believe it. All this time she thought he was just bored and was just playing with her out of boredom. "Damn it, I'm more serious than I've ever been in my life." Maximo took her by the arm and pulled her toward him, lifting her out of the chair. Victoria didn't resist. He wrapped both arms around her waist. She could feel her knees trembling, his hot breath burning her face. "Victoria, my love," he whispered softly, "if you only knew what an obsession you've become for me. I'm crazy about you. I tried to forget you, tried not to think about you. But I failed. When I close my eyes, I see you, your smile, your lips, your eyes, your loose hair. I dreamed so much of running my fingers through your hair." And finally, his fingers gently touched her hair. Victoria closed her eyes, mesmerized by his voice and his confession. "Even if I cover my ears," he went on, "I can still hear your laughter ringing in my head, your voice. If you only knew what a torment it is to love someone with no response." Victoria shuddered. "To love?" Maximo smiled sadly. "Do you still have any doubts? I'm in love with you like crazy. But you don't have to worry. I won't disturb you in any way. At first, when your husband lost you to me during a gambling game, I rejoiced, thinking that now you would be mine. At least for one night, but mine. And then I realized that if I did that to you, I'd never forgive myself. You're not a woman for one night. I wanted you forever. I wish my feelings for you were mutual, but what makes you think they're not mutual?" Victoria interrupted him. Maximo shuddered. "Don't joke with me like that, please, it's a very cruel joke. I'm not joking. Victoria put her hands on his shoulders. There's something strange going on with me, too. Ever since I met you, I've been telling myself that I hate you, I must hate you. But I didn't. A wild, crazy, desperate hope flashed in his eyes. Victoria, please tell me it's true. It's true, she nodded. I really like you. Maximo looked greedily into her face for a few moments, then he exhaled noisily and hesitantly asked, Can I kiss you? Victoria couldn't stand it and laughed out loud. Silly boy, why do you even ask about that? Just kiss me. And Maximo kissed her. They decided to make the wedding lavish and expensive in order to shut the mouths of all the gossipers once and for all. Despite all Maximo's assurances that he wouldn't harm Victoria's ex-husband, he still got his revenge. It turns out that the gambling game where Alejandro first lost his wife was recorded by hidden cameras. Maximo made sure that all of Alejandro's former colleagues, acquaintances, and friends got this video. It showed him being pathetic, crying and begging Maximo to forgive him, and then offering his wife as a ransom. This video exploded like a bombshell. All of Victoria's acquaintances and friends immediately turned their backs on her ex-husband. The only one who still defended him and assured him that it was all Victoria's fault was his mother, Victoria's mother-in-law Margarita Perez. But since she was considered an ex-mother-in-law a long time ago, Victoria didn't care about her opinion at all. Dalia also watched that video and saw her father's true face. Later she came to her mother, cried, and asked for forgiveness. And Victoria forgave her. Of course, she did. Any mother would forgive her child. At the wedding party, Pablo was a real little gentleman in a bow tie suit. However, when he saw the wedding cake, he immediately forgot about his important appearance and asked for a piece, a very big piece of cake. By the way, the cake was made at Victoria's pastry shop. She called it the Sweet Life because she believed wholeheartedly that after a black streak of bad luck, everything in her life would go on in a new, truly sweet way. Business at the bakery was very successful. Now there were 5 employees. Victoria ran her business skillfully, was friendly and honest with her customers, and she had no competitors in the entire city. Some pastry shops tried to copy her cakes or waffle recipes, but no one succeeded in making them as tasty as Victoria did. Am I starting to get lucky? Victoria thought happily, looking at Maximo with loving eyes, and she caught the same look of devotion and sincere love in return. During the newlyweds' dance, Maximo leaned toward her ear and whispered, "Thank you, Victoria." For what? Victoria wondered merrily. For agreeing to be mine. Not for one night, but for life.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.